all of you beautiful people out there. How are y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season, off season. It does not matter because it's football. I'm your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to this Week 14 recap of the 2023 National Football League season. We are getting closer and closer to the postseason as each day passes, and I am getting more and more excited. But before we get into the show, I like to ask, if you have not done so already, to please like, subscribe, and share the video if you have not done so already and you enjoy this content or know anybody that would enjoy this kind of content. Helps boost our exposure, get us out into the algorithm, get more eyeballs on the product. So if you have not done so already and you'd like to, that'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you've not done so already, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports to help support the channel financially, help put food in my belly. So if you'd like to, the link to that is in the description down below. But let's get on with the video. There is quite a few things to talk about coming out of Week 14, and the biggest thing that I can think of that sums up this week the best is nobody outside of the 49ers really wants to be a great football team, apparently. Or I should say establish themselves as true dominant forces that can be dominant forces consistently. You can make an argument for one team that we're going to talk about later in the show, but even they're still up in the air, and you'll understand why when we get to them. But first, we got to talk about the game that a lot of people were anticipating coming into the week because, you know, when these two teams play every year, it's always going to be a really fun matchup. I'm, of course, talking about the Buffalo Bills heading to Arrowhead Stadium to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. And like I said, it's always a fun matchup whenever these two teams face each other. And there's always something. The one common thing that these games have is that it's not just they're good football games that go right down to the wire. It's that there's always seemingly something that everyone is talking about coming out of this game that is quote-unquote controversial. You know, when you think back to the epic playoff game between these two a couple of years ago, it was the overtime rules, and it was 13 seconds and all this stuff. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new one. We went from overtime gate to offsides gates, apparently. And I hesitate to say it's really a controversy because, well, just see for yourself. I know everyone has seen this photo by this point, but it's very clear that Kadarius Toney was lined up offsides. For those of you who seemingly don't know, this was another great game that went down to the wire. Under 2 minutes, the Buffalo Bills ended up kicking a field goal to put them up 20-17, which was way more than enough time for Patrick Mahomes to drive down the field and tie the game and or take the lead. And it seemed like that was going to be the case once again. It was on I believe a 2nd and 10, if I'm not mistaken, around midfield, where Patrick Mahomes dropped back, threw a dime right down the seam to Travis Kelce, and Kelce made one of the greatest plays I've ever seen, where he was on the run, running around, evading defenders, and then looks behind him, sees Kadarius Toney all by himself, throws a lateral across the field to Kadarius Toney, who catches it and runs past everyone, beats out the angles, and scores a touchdown. One of the most insane, exciting plays I have seen in a while. And the first thing I noticed after that was the flag graphic pop up on the CBS broadcast. And I was like, hold on, let's see what the flag is. And I'm like, could it be holding? Could it be on the defense? Probably most likely going to be on the defense. And then you hear the call that you almost never hear in the NFL. And that call was offensive offsides or neutral zone infraction on the offense. And I am sitting here like, excuse me, and then they show the still shot on the broadcast, and Kadarius Toney, his front foot is over the line of scrimmage. It wasn't just he was lined up over the line. He was like a full foot damn near over the line of scrimmage. And I'm just sitting here. I played football myself. I was a wide receiver myself. And they teach you this in fucking Pee-wee, that if you are a wide receiver and the formation is you're supposed to be on the line of scrimmage, you are supposed to check with the official and say, hey, am I on the line? And usually they will, if you're not on the line, they'll either tell you to scoot forward, or if you're over offsides, they'll tell you to scoot back, and then they'll give you a thumbs up, and you're like, all right, and now you're set. And somebody found the footage where Kadarius Toney, he does go up, he does check, but he's not even set when he checks. And then he checks, but he's still going up to the line, looks back at the ball, and then gets set in the neutral zone. So he does do his job, but not the way it's supposed to be done, if that makes sense. So I'm watching this, and I'm like, how does that even happen in the National Football League? How does a wide receiver who is a first-round draft pick, who is a Super Bowl champion, playing in his third season in the National Football League, in a critical situation that late in the game, do something, have a mental error like that? It doesn't make sense. And it's not even just this with Kadarius Toney or just these receivers in general. I mean, these receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs have been they have been the biggest bugaboo for this team, and it's really kept this Chiefs team from really reaching the potential and reaching the heights that we know they're capable of reaching, that we've seen them be capable of reaching. And it's whether it's the drops, it's the dumbass mental mistakes, it's Sky Moore just choosing to stop running his route on a critical down in the critical situation. I mean, the same thing happened in Green Bay the week before, where it was late in the game, it was a critical drive, and Sky Moore, on that final interception, Sky Moore just stops running his route for some random ass reason. And it's like, I feel bad for Chiefs fans in that regard. I mean, not fully, but I feel bad because it's like, how great this team can be, and it's these dumbass mistakes that keep holding the team back. And it's not even just the wide receivers, because I'm going to put up, and I didn't realize this until Rich Eisen on the Rich Eisen show pointed this out, but if you see this still shot, not only is it, again, clear as obvious that Kadarius Toney is lined up in the neutral zone, but look at Jawan Taylor, the right tackle. He's lined up illegally again. It's been this kind of thing with him all year. And it's like, it's these little things, like these little attention to detail things that this team is just not following. And it's holding them back. And it's like, why is this happening? And then you had, it resulted in a penalty. It turned into a 3rd and 15 as opposed to a touchdown. And he threw back-to-back incomplete passes. And that's where you got the viral clip of, Patrick Mahomes just losing his shit towards the referee and then going up to Josh Allen saying it's the worst call he's ever seen. And I looked at that and I'm like, I look at that. He's going to be a little surprised when he sees that clip, or that all 22 clip, the next morning. And then he's going to really be embarrassed about him being caught on camera saying, it's the worst call I've ever seen. And, people brought this up, and it's a great point. People ask, was it the right call? Absolutely, it was the right call. And people ask, well, should they have called it in that situation that late in the game? And like, the fact that that's even a topic of conversation is laughable to me. Because when you see a penalty that egregious, you have to call it. I don't care if Patrick Mahomes starts throwing a shit fit over it. I don't care if Andy Reid's openly making excuses and calling the refs out for making the right call. I don't give a shit. I don't care if it's taking away a play in the Hall of Fame career for Travis Kelce, like Patrick Mahomes was trying to say in the post-game press conference, which made no fucking sense. Like that, like, out of all the talk about him, losing his shit on the sideline and saying what he said to Josh Allen, him making that comment about you took a great play away from the Hall of Fame career of Travis Kelce, that was by far the dumbest thing out of all of that. So, but again, it's like these little things that's holding this team back, especially considering this is the first year in a long time where the defense is really holding this team together. They are keeping this team afloat. For years past, the Chiefs' defense has been sort of like up and down, but they've been able to get hot at the right time. This year, they've been hot from the first week of the season, and they've stayed hot. They've been one of the best defenses in the NFL. They're the reason this team is 8-5, not the offense. And considering you're talking about an offense led by Patrick Mahomes, that's saying a lot. And, I kind of alluded to this last week, but, you have all these receivers that are making critical errors at the worst possible times. And, it's that dice roll you have when you pay your quarterback that much money and you're not able to bring back guys like Tyreek Hill, which, my God, like, this team would look so much different if Tyreek Hill was still Kansas City Chief. But yeah, it's these dumb little mistakes that are holding this team back. And I think it's these dumb mistakes that are going to hold them back come playoff time. I'm not going to say this team's going to be at risk of going one and done, but, it's any given Sunday. Who the hell knows at this point? But they're definitely not the Kansas City Chiefs that we've been accustomed to seeing, and they're definitely not the Kansas City Chiefs that everyone's scared of. Now, can this team still get hot come January and go on a run? Absolutely. You can't say that they're not capable of doing that. They absolutely are. After all, we talk about this team and we're criticizing this team. It's still the damn near the exact same team that won the Super Bowl last year. So you can't say that this team still isn't a threat in the postseason, but the whole, oh no, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, that luster's starting to wear off significantly. And as far as the Buffalo Bills, my God, did the Bills need this win or what? Like, the Bills, we kind of criticized them a lot throughout most of the middle part of the season because they had offensive issues. They were very one-dimensional on offense, still kind of are to an extent, but they had a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and they really did look like a lost football team. And, now, all of a sudden, they've won a few games consecutively. Josh Allen has gone back to looking like the Josh Allen that we view as a top 5, if not top 3 quarterback in football. And all of a sudden, this team is starting to get on a roll again. And they're doing it at the right time with 4 games left in the season. And they have a very favorable schedule. They play Dallas next week. That's going to be a fun game to watch, and it's going to be a tough one for them. But after that, I think they have 2 division games, and those 2 division games are against New England and Miami, with the Chargers right in the middle of all that. So, a Chargers team that now doesn't have Justin Herbert for the remainder of the season. So, they are in a great spot all of a sudden at, I believe, 7-6 now, in a great position to not just sneak into the postseason, but potentially be put in a spot where they can even win the AFC East. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's the case later on in the show. But yeah, what a win for Buffalo. Heartbreaking loss for the Kansas City Chiefs. And yeah, that's really all there is to say about that. And now let's move on to the primetime games. First off, starting off with Sunday Night Football between the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Dallas Cowboys. These teams had already played each other earlier in the year, and that was a very, very close game that Philadelphia was able to escape with the win, even though we all kind of said at that time that the Cowboys played better than the Eagles in that game, but it just didn't result in a win for the Dallas Cowboys. Well, they remembered that in this game, and there's no other way to say it. There's really no other way to say this. The Cowboys curb stomped the Philadelphia Eagles. There's no other way to say it. You know, the Cowboys were just straight up the better team in every way, shape, or form. You know, they were better on the offensive side of the ball. Dak Prescott continues to show why he is one of the favorites for NFL MVP with 2 touchdown passes on the night. And the Cowboys defense feasted again. The Philadelphia Eagle offense, we'll talk a little bit more about the Eagles in a second. But the Cowboys defense was able to hold that Eagle offense in check. And there's really nothing else to say about the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, we already kind of knew that they're becoming a top 3 team in the NFL and becoming a legitimate Super Bowl favorite. And that was officially established on Sunday night, where they just said, hey, we are the cream of the crop. We're getting close to the cream of the crop. I'm not going to say that they're in 49er territory yet, because, you know, the one time they played each other this year, the 49ers boat raced them, and boat raced them badly. So if they were to play each other, I would still say the 49ers would win that game. But, man, this Cowboys team is just getting better and better and better. And they are looking just as dominant as on paper they should be. You know, we look at the Cowboys every year and we say, like, they have talent. That's never been disputed. But it's that talent can never just reach their full potential and put it all together and show the world how great they can be. Well, this year they're finally doing that. They are finally doing that, and they're showing it at the right time. You know, this is a team that has all the talent, and they're finally putting it together. And that's miserable for the rest of America because, you know, we all take the joy in laughing at the misery of the Dallas Cowboys. And we don't have that laugh anymore. Cowboys fans are now, you know, they're getting the last laugh, at least for right now. We'll still see how they fare come postseason time. And I still think if it ended up being 49ers Cowboys in the NFC Championship game, I still feel pretty confident that it would be San Francisco. But yeah, man, they are really asserting themselves as the cream of the crop of not just the NFC, but of the NFL in general. And as far as the Philadelphia Eagles, man, you know, somebody on Twitter pointed this out, where each month of the season, there's been that one team that had a lot of expectations that just goes on a skid, and all of a sudden you lose faith on if they can be that dominant. It was the Lions at one point. For a 3-game stretch, it was the San Francisco 49ers. And now, all of a sudden, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are now that team. And, you know, they're still sitting here at 10-3. And again, it's the same thing with the Cowboys, where they have a bunch of talent. That's not disputable. But all of a sudden, that fear of, oh no, we're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, is starting to slip away. You know, with an embarrassing loss earlier in the year to the Jets, back-to-back losses against the 49ers and now the Cowboys. And both games, they just got destroyed in. Like, those games weren't even competitions, especially the 49er game. And this team is now being really, really vulnerable. And I no longer had the confidence in this team to make a deep playoff run, let alone a Super Bowl appearance. Jalen Hurts has not looked like the Jalen Hurts from last year. A.J. Brown was on an historic pace, and he's slowed down a bit in production. The defense looks great on paper, but they just can't seem to get it together consistently. And yeah, it's just so weird to look at because it's almost like the Eagles and the Cowboys have kind of switched roles because, like I said earlier, it's been historically the Cowboys that have had all this talent, but they can never seem to put it together. And the Eagles, when they've been able to have talent in recent years, they've been able to go on runs and be really good and be really dominant. Now, all of a sudden, it seems like the roles are reversing. And it's weird to see. And yeah, all of a sudden, an Eagles team that was viewed as a favorite coming out of the NFC is now in a spot where it's like, if things don't go the right way for them, they could be playing their first playoff game on the road. And, they might be able to win a playoff game. At the end of the day, they have too much talent to not at least win one playoff game. But what happens when they go to the divisional round and they have to go to Dallas again? Or if they have to go to San Francisco? Or let's say, who knows, another team. Let's say, they go to Detroit. The Detroit Lions have had their issues as well recently, but do you feel as confident in the Eagles when they play against the Detroit Lions? All of a sudden, I don't feel as confident about that anymore. So, it's such a weird situation considering not too long ago, the Eagles were right up there as, one of the elites of the league. And now they've just kind of fallen into this category with all the other teams of, hey, they're great. They have great rosters. They have, potentials to make Super Bowl runs. But the confidence for them to actually pull that off is significantly lower than what it once was earlier in the year. And yeah, they had a chance to really say, hey, last week against San Francisco was just a fluke. Now we're coming in to play against a team that we already beaten earlier in the year and to really assert ourselves of like, hey, last week was just a one-off thing. We're not going to let that happen again. And they basically let it happen again. It wasn't as bad as it was against San Francisco, but it was still pretty bad. And yeah, man, I've lost not all hope in the Philadelphia Eagles, but it's their fear factor as far as teams being scared to play them has definitely taken a huge, huge hit over these last few weeks. But now let's talk about the two games that I am really excited to talk about. Because we had, once again, for the first time since week 2, I believe, week 2 or week 3, where we had a Monday night doubleheader. We had 2 games on Monday Night Football going on at the exact same time. And both of those games were really good games. They were really fun to watch. And they were both massive, massive upsets. Let's talk about the first game, which was the Green Bay Packers heading to MetLife to take on the Tommy DeVito-led New York Giants. And yeah, there's really nothing to say about the Green Bay Packers. I do think it's just a little blip in the road, and I think they did kind of play down to their competition a little bit. But that's really all there is to say about the Green Bay Packers. But the main thing that we're talking about coming out of this game, the story of Tommy DeVito, of Tommy Cutlets himself. I saw that their hoodie's on sale. I want a hoodie now. I want a Tommy Cutlets hoodie for Christmas now. And this story is just a phenomenal story that if you saw it in Hollywood, it would get criticized because it's so cartoonish, it's so unrealistic that no one would believe it as a real thing. Because nobody would think that a young man born and raised in New Jersey, growing up in an Italian family, who at 21, 22 years old still lives at home and went to play football at Syracuse University, goes undrafted, gets signed as an undrafted rookie free agent by the New York Giants, the same team that he just saw play his entire life, 12 minutes away from his home. He lives 12 minutes away. He grew up 12 minutes away from the facility. And despite now being a starting NFL quarterback due to circumstances, because the two guys ahead of him were injured on the depth chart, despite now having to be a starting NFL quarterback, is still living with said parents. And then when he was asked about it, he's like, hey, I got everything I need. You know, I get, my laundry done for me. I get food for free. I get chicken cutlets every night. Everything's good. I don't need anything else. Well, guess what, bro? This off season's like, you're going to get a little more money. You're going to get a bit more money. And if you're choosing to still live with your parents when you're making that much money, then, hey, you know what? You do you, bro. But you're going to get some people that are going to be like, bro, you are making too much damn money now to still be living at home. But then when you see, his family in the stands celebrating and, they're all doing the thing, and it's like, damn's like, no wonder he likes staying at home. They seem like great people. They seem like great loving people. And then to see him help this team win 3 straight games and then proceed to do what he did on Monday night, where he played a really good game. Like, they were leading most of this game. And then to get in a situation where the Packers take the lead late, and then he drives them down the field. Now, there are going to be people be like, against a Joe Barry defense playing prevent defense. So what? This was a guy in Tommy DeVito that many people were saying isn't even an NFL rostered player. Yeah, you could say it's against a Joe Barry defense playing prevent defense, but at the end of the day, you still have to be able to execute. You still have to be able to drive down the field and do that to put your team in a position to win against an NFL defense. You still have to execute at the end of the day, and Tommy DeVito executed. And then they set them up in a position where they were able to get the game-winning field goal and beat the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football. And it is absolutely incredible to see it. You see his family doing, the Italian thing. His teammates are doing it. It's become a thing now. He's become a cult hero in the Big Apple now all of a sudden. And now there's been talks about whether or not Tommy DeVito should actually be this team's starting quarterback going into 2024. And whether they should even bring Daniel Jones back. Because, at the end of the day, it's behind the same offensive line that Daniel Jones played behind, and everyone was saying, no one can survive behind that offensive line. Well, guess what? Tommy DeVito played behind that same O-line on Monday Night Football. You know how many sacks he took? He didn't get sacked once. He didn't get sacked a single time. All while, he never turned the ball over. He had no turnovers on Monday night. And he completed 80% of his passes. And he made some big plays with his legs as well. It is insane. The Italian powers are running wild with him. And then I find out after the fact, after this game, I can't believe I forgot to bring this up at first. After the game, I saw this picture that was taken before this game in the pregame of him talking to his agent. Now, when you hear that, you're like, okay, yeah, sure, he's a quarterback. Of course he'd have an agent. He's an NFL football player. It would be weird if he didn't have an agent. You don't get weirded out by that, or I shouldn't say weirded out, but you don't think it's like a funny thing or anything until you hear everything about Tommy DeVito's story, and then he's talking to his agent who looks like this. He showed up in 2023 on a NFL football field with a man wearing a black blazer and a fedora. I saw this and I'm like, there's no way. There's no way this is real. This cannot be real. This is all too good. This is all too funny for it to be real. And sure enough, it is. It's too perfect. I can see the fucking movie with the fucking Warner Bros. Picture coming up now. I can see it already. It is a story so outlandishly funny. Unintentionally so. A story too perfect for it to actually be real. And it is. And you couldn't write this shit, people. You could not fucking write it. And now all of a sudden, with him doing all this, becoming a cult hero, he's getting merch now, apparently. And I saw that Tommy Cutlet's hoodie. I'm not joking when I say I want that now. And mixed in with the fact that he's playing well and they're winning games now, and this team looked dead in the water for most of the year. Now, and I alluded to this, there are talks about whether he should be the starter going into 2024. We'll see how these last 4 games play out. But, man, it's such a great story, and it's a fun one to follow. And who knows? For all we know, he could just be, hey, he's nothing more than a backup. And he'll forever just be a okay backup that you want playing in spurts, but not a guy you want as your full-time starter. It could very well be that. But while we have it, God damn it, I'm going to enjoy it. God damn it, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm just going to enjoy the ride, man. It's a fun ride to be on, and I want to be on the ride. So that's it about Tommy DeVito. But now we need to talk about the other Monday night game that happened simultaneously. And that game was the Tennessee Titans heading to Miami to take on the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Miami Dolphins, they've been in a spot all year where they've been able to beat up on teams that are not very good or have losing records, and they haven't really beaten a team that has a true winning record at the time of playing them, and it was a really good contending team at the time of playing them. And the Miami Dolphins are going to be facing a tough schedule, in particular in the last 3 weeks of the season. They play the Jets next week at home. But then, after that, their last 3 games are home against Dallas, at Baltimore, and then home against Buffalo to end the year. And that's a very, very tough stretch of games, considering the reputation around this team. So the view was, all right, they have Monday night against Tennessee, then they have that game against the Jets, and those are 2 good games to try and stack up their record a little more before they face the gauntlet at the end of the season. What no one was anticipating was the Miami Dolphins to go up 2 scores within the final 3 minutes of the ball game after Tennessee had their typical special teams miscues with a muff punt and then a turnover in the next drive by Will Levis. And that led to two Raheem Mostert rushing touchdowns to seemingly put the game away. But what people weren't anticipating was Miami to somehow implode on itself and have one of the most spectacular collapses I could see in recent memory that allowed the Tennessee Titans to score 15 unanswered points and take the lead by 28-27, and eventually win the ball game. That's not what I was anticipating, and I don't think anybody was anticipating that. So, first of all, this game, if anything, even though the Dolphins lost, even though Tyreek Hill did not have a particularly great game, in fact, he was injured most of this game, but this game proved why Tyreek Hill should be the NFL MVP. Because when he went out on a blatant horse collar tackle, and he got his leg and his knee all rolled up on, he had to go out of the game for the remainder of the first half. And when he did, this Miami Dolphin offense, the high-powered Dolphins offense that can score at will and have these long touchdowns whenever they feel like it, Tyreek goes out of the game. All of a sudden, this offense looks like it doesn't know what to do. They all of a sudden can't move the ball. They all of a sudden can't put up points. Tua's holding the ball way longer than he ever did all season. And all of a sudden, this offense looks mortal. If anything, it looks average. And that alone proved like, wow, Tyreek Hill is way more essential to this team than I think anybody could have thought. Like, we still thought, like, even if they missed Tyreek Hill, they would still be able to, at the very least, move the ball a little bit, because they still have other playmakers. But they just looked anemic at times when Tyreek Hill wasn't in the game. And then he eventually comes back into the game in the middle of the third quarter and almost immediately gets two long down the field catches for big chunks, and another one late in the fourth quarter that put them in a position in first and goal and allowed them to score. All of a sudden, he comes back into the game, and all of a sudden the offense looks great again. All of a sudden they're able to move the ball down the field again. All of a sudden they're able to put points on the board again. Tyreek Hill should be the NFL MVP just based on this game alone, because it shows how valuable he is to this team. That's number one. Number two, we were talking about the Miami Dolphins being in a great position to, get the number one seed, because they're still in that race, a mix of top teams in the AFC that are still in contention for that number one seed in that first round bye. But now, all of a sudden after this week, and Buffalo's recent hot streak, we're now in a situation with the Miami Dolphins where it's like, they might not even get a home playoff game. And then you look at the remaining schedule that I already said, and now it's like, could this team potentially miss the playoffs? Because all of a sudden, because the Jets came off a huge win against the Houston Texans, and Zach Wilson came back into the starting lineup and had his best game. So he's probably feeling it a little bit. And that Jets defense is still incredible as ever. So that's all of a sudden not going to be as much of a cakewalk as the Black Friday game is going to be, probably. And then I already told you the 3-game gauntlet to end the season against Dallas, Baltimore, and Buffalo. All of a sudden, this thing is starting to look like it's starting to have signs of it potentially imploding on itself. And that's very nerve-wracking, if you're a Dolphins fan. And, we all love Mike McDaniel, and we all know how great this offense is. But this is a question I have to put out there, because we all know the NFL stands for not for long, and it's a, what have you done for me lately kind of league. If the worst case scenario happens, which is they lose out and they potentially not just lose out on the division, but potentially miss the postseason entirely, does that lay the grounds for Mike McDaniel potentially losing his job? This is a serious question. This is not me trying to do a hot take. This is a serious question you have to ask, because, remember, this is the same Dolphins team that fired Brian Flores when everyone looked at them and was like, what the fuck are you doing? He's got this team playing the best it had in years, and you're firing him for what reason? Just knowing what ownership is like and seeing what this team, the position they were in late in the year, and then seeing a spot where they could just not win the division and potentially miss out on the playoffs as a whole, you're telling me that wouldn't rub ownership the wrong way? You're telling me that wouldn't put Mike McDaniel on potentially a hot seat? It's just something to think about. And it's like the perfect storm is starting to form, with the Dolphins having their reputation of not being able to compete well or beat good teams, and then looking at their remaining schedule, and then Buffalo getting on a hot streak, and then looking at their remaining schedule. It's not looking good for Miami. And then seeing how other teams in that pit of wildcard teams and how they're playing, you look at Indianapolis, Houston, you look at, I'm trying to think of who else, Jacksonville, though Jacksonville's probably going to end up winning their division, but who knows at this point. They're right in the mix. And it wouldn't shock me at all if things don't go Miami's way and they end up not playing in January. That's a real possibility all of a sudden. So that's really all I have to say about that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to put a wrap on the episode today. Like I said, if you're not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you like this content and know anybody that would enjoy this kind of content. And if you'd like to go support me on Patreon, the link to that is in the description down below. But with that being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.